there's a culture among some of the nobility. I don't want to, it's never everybody, it's a few people, but they make such a negative impact that, say, there's a few of those people in a culture where child abuse is normalized and where extreme things happen. And so there were certain very sadistic members of the nobility. And in those first years, sometimes I was also given to those people. So I was not involved in any type of religious ritual in the first years. And that's, I think, primarily because that minister who started out as a butcher and was basically came from the middle class and worked his way up, was himself not a believing Satanist at all. But at age 9, so now 1972, there was the Bilderberg meeting in Belgium, and that was great for the people in the network, or I call it a club at the time, it was a club with levels. So the children were sort of the ultimate level and were mostly used for blackmail. But then there were powerful people with very sadistic desires that were then also taken care of, and it linked to the royalty as well. So meaning the nobility, certain people in the nobility. So the culture was one where, really child abuse is normalized and anything goes. So it's similar to the Satanists. They do the same things. But it wasn't, I didn't feel that there was any, or I didn't experience anything religious up until when I was 9. And there was a ritual that was set up to please one of the people that was coming to Belgium for the Bilderberg meeting. And so for this American billionaire, they staged a satanic ritual. And that had the elements of Satanism, with everybody wearing black robes and, and hoods. And it took place in below a cathedral, in the basement of a cathedral. It seemed that was sort of the reverse of what was happening upstairs. And so there wasn't a very old altar, a black altar, and there was a pentagram, and there were all the elements were there. And 2 children were given to this billionaire, and there was a little boy with me that I was 9 and he was 7, and he was a little bit slow. He was a little bit mentally handicapped, and so I'm sorry, I felt very protective of him, and he was killed.
In front of you?
Yes, I was. In fact, there were 2 children. One was to be sacrificed, and the other one was to be raped by that billionaire, by the special guest. And so I was raped, but I was also forced to watch.
I'm so sorry you went through that. I mean, I can't even imagine what that must have felt like for a 9-year-old girl.
Yeah, it's something I can't, it's just, I felt so protective of that little boy. So it was so complex for me because I already knew him from the network. I already felt so protective because his innocence was just shining through. And at that time, I felt so much that my innocence was lost. And I felt so old compared to him. And I loved his innocence and I wanted to protect him. And also because he was special, that maybe it was so pitiful because he was crying so hard. So there was nothing to dampen, or to minimize what was happening in front of me. And it's just, a lot of very horrible things happened, but I just have, it's been so hard.
It's really hard for those of us who have empathy or compassion to imagine that not just one person, but a group of people can get together. And when do they even first say to one another, we're going to do this, what do you think? Because most people would scream and call the police or something. How do they even, I don't even know where to start with this. It's so horrifying.
Yeah. And that's the special club. So the Minister of National Defense, first there's the corruption and the greed, and then beyond that, there's, the people who didn't say no when they were confronted with a 6-year-old child. They were already triaged by the minister just to make sure that they were not going to say no. Because I never had anybody saying no, and I was always stunned that they were going to not say, my goodness, this is a little girl, this is a child, I'm not doing this. So they were clearly pedophiles. And in the system, to be a pedophile, you have to be very cut off, right? You can't, nobody healthy would think that a child would be used for sex. That is completely crazy. That is really sick. So there it begins. That requires you to be completely sick. And then that sickness, those, in my experience, those who needed the power, they were pulled into this system, which then becomes completely psychopathic at the top levels anyway.
Where were your parents in this?
So as I said, my mother was mentally ill.
Yeah.
My stepfather was extremely absent, and it's in my book. I mean, I tried to tell him once when I was a child, and then he didn't believe me.
Where were they getting hold of you, the elites?
So my mother actually had a contact person who didn't live so far. She was a countess. She was a part of Opus Dei in the group, a religious group, and so the certain tier of Opus Dei was then involved in this network. So was, when we're talking about the minister, he was a Freemason, and then a certain tier of the Freemasons were also involved in this network. And I think a lot of the people that were being brought in came through the Masons or some club, some secret society that already was secret, and where there already were a lot of promises made never to speak and everything. So that by the time, they were triaged, and how much do you want it is the question, right? How much do you want the power? And whatever it is that when you lack the self-esteem, but you want the power, it's not just ambition, because ambition is connected to the self and aligned with everything you are and what you want from life. But there it is sheer ambition because you're lacking the self-esteem because of previous trauma. So you're running away from your own trauma, from your own shadows by climbing the ladder. And this is what was offered. The more you want it, that's to say, the sicker you are, the more you don't have a sense of self, the more you're not connected to yourself. It begins with pedophilia, but that's already really extreme. It's extremely common. So it's also really extreme in nature, like to think that, to see a child as a sex object is crazy. All these men treated me as if I was a 6-year-old prostitute. And I knew that I wasn't. I knew that much.
Did you know this was wrong?
I did the first years, but then this American billionaire, through extraordinary circumstances that really are beyond me, have nothing to do with me really, then took an interest in me. And that then landed me in what I call the global network, which was what the Belgians were very hard trying to get connected to these people, to do business with them and everything. And then the children, of course, the gift of these 2 children was in that system, really the secret currency.